Alexander Solonik. In 1990s Russia, his name carried fear and fascination. A former policeman turned contract killer, he became one of the most notorious assassins of the post-Soviet underworld. Known for his deadly accuracy, his charm, and his ruthlessness, Solonik rose from obscurity to legend in the chaotic years after the fall of the Soviet Union. But who was Alexander Solonik? How did a boy from a quiet Russian town become one of the most feared hitmen in the world? And why, even decades later, does his story still capture the imagination? Alexander Viktorovich Solonik was born on October 16, 1960, in Kurgan, a small city in the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. From an early age, he stood out. Teachers remembered him as bright but restless. He trained in martial arts, showed a fascination with weapons, and had a knack for precision. After high school, Solonik briefly studied to become a chemical engineer. But his real path soon led him into law enforcement. He joined the Soviet police force, where he worked for a short time. Colleagues quickly noticed his unusual skill. He was an exceptional marksman, capable of shooting with both hands, ambidextrous, deadly, and accurate. But Solonik's career as a policeman didn't last long. He was dismissed for misconduct, and by the late 1980s, his life took a darker turn. As the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990s, chaos ruled the streets. Organized crime flourished. The Russian Mafia grew in power, and hired killers became essential in settling scores between rival gangs. Solonik, with his police training and sharpshooting skills, was a perfect recruit. He was first arrested in 1987 for the attempted rape of a young woman, but managed to escape custody in a daring prison break. From that moment on, he lived outside the law. Soon, he entered the underworld, offering his services as a contract killer, and his reputation grew fast. By the early 1990s, Solonik was one of the most sought-after hitmen in Russia. He became infamous for carrying out assassinations in broad daylight, often against heavily guarded targets. Unlike many killers, he wasn't reckless. He was methodical, calm, and almost fearless. One of his most famous hits was in 1994 when he killed Viktor Nikiforov, the leader of Moscow's Uralmash gang, in a crowded cafe. Later, he assassinated Otari Kvantrishvili, a powerful Georgian mobster, right in Moscow, a killing that shocked the criminal world and made Solonik legendary. His ability to take out high-profile targets, often while outnumbered, earned him the nickname Alexander the Great in Russian underworld circles. But with notoriety came danger. Both the Mafia and law enforcement wanted him dead or behind bars. Solonik was arrested more than once, but each time he managed to escape. In 1994, he was captured and placed in Moscow's Matrosskaya Tishina prison, one of the most secure in Russia. Yet even there he escaped, humiliating the Russian justice system and boosting his myth as untouchable. After his escape, he fled to Greece, where he lived in luxury with his girlfriend, a former Russian beauty queen. From abroad, he continued to work as a contract killer, carrying out hits for major Russian crime organizations. But his freedom wouldn't last forever. By the late 1990s, Solonik had made too many enemies. In 1997, his body was discovered strangled in a villa outside Athens. Officially, the hit was attributed to rival Russian mobsters who wanted him silenced. Others believe he was betrayed by his own associates. At just 36 years old, the life of one of Russia's most infamous killers came to an end, violently as it had been lived. Alexander Solonik remains one of the most notorious figures in Russian criminal history. To some, he was a symbol of the lawless post-Soviet era, a time when contract killings and mafia wars were part of daily life. To others, he was a monster who left a trail of blood behind him. His story is both fascinating and terrifying. A brilliant marksman who could have used his skills in service of the law, but chose instead a path of violence, money, and power. This is the story of Alexander Solonik, the assassin known as Alexander the Great, whose name still echoes in the shadows of Russia's criminal underworld. If you found this deep dive insightful, subscribe for more true crime documentaries. And remember, behind every headline, there are real people whose lives were cut short by crime.